the petals of the forgotten and the enduring strength of a heart willing to forgive. Her story was no longer one of dread and domination, but of delicate balance, where the shadows of yesterday nourished the blossoms of tomorrow. And with each breath, the jungle itself seemed to pulse in harmony, echoing the rhythm of a world on the cusp of renewal. But as the light deepened and the flowers' glow intensified, a whispered question lingered in the air. How far was Alina willing to go to protect this fragile hope? And what sacrifices awaited her in the shadows yet to come? The roots of redemption stretched deep, and the journey was only beginning. The rare flower rested on the wooden table before her, its petals slowly unfurling in an unsteady, deliberate rhythm. Each movement whispered secrets, fragments of memories carried on a breath of wind, shadows of a past that refused to die. Alina's green eyes, sharp and reflective like the jungle canopy, remained fixed on the blossom, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached out to touch the delicate surface. The flower's glow intensified, bathing the room in a soft, otherworldly light that flickered like the pulse of a distant heartbeat. From deep within the petals came a low murmur, a chorus of voices, both haunting and compelling. It was the voice of King Velen, the forgotten tyrant whose soul had been trapped within this living vessel. His presence was a dark tide against the gentle beauty of the flower, a storm of power and cruelty woven into its core. Alina felt the weight of his gaze piercing and relentless seeping into her thoughts, stirring a tempest of fear and fascination. She swallowed hard, heart pounding in her chest. The decision before her was monumental. To destroy this flower, this vessel of ancient pain and power, would mean erasing a piece of the Empire's history, painful though it was. Yet to preserve it risked unleashing the tyrant's shadow upon the present, threatening to engulf not only her identity but the fragile peace that had settled over the jungle empire. Her mind raced with memories her parents lost to the ruthless memory traders, the countless stories of suffering she'd uncovered, the whispered warnings from Morrow and Ellis. And yet, beneath the fear, a stubborn spark of hope flickered. In the stillness, a soft voice broke through her reverie. Alina, Ellis's ethereal tone drifted from the doorway, her silver-vined hair shimmering in the dim light. The flower is not just a prison, but a seed. Within it lies the power to transform, to reconcile what was broken. But you must be willing to face the darkness without turning away. Alina nodded slowly, drawing strength from the Dreamwalker's calm presence. I know what risks I face, she said, voice steady despite the quiver in her soul. But I cannot let fear dictate the future. This flower, this tyrant's soul must become a force for healing, not destruction. Ellis smiled faintly, stepping forward to join her by the table. Then, let us begin. Together, they prepared the ritual, weaving ancient floral magic with the botanical knowledge Alina had painstakingly gathered. Petals from the flower shimmered like liquid starlight as they danced through the air, forming intricate patterns that pulsed with spectral energy. The laboratory seemed to dissolve around them, replaced by a swirling dreamscape garden where colors bled into one another, and the scent of countless blossoms hung heavy with meaning. Alina reached out, hands trembling but resolute, to the flower's core. The tyrant's presence surged forward, a dark tempest wrapped in regal petals and shadowy tendrils. His piercing eyes locked with hers, challenging, demanding. For a moment, the weight of centuries pressed down, threatening to crush her spirit and steal her identity. But Alina clung to the memories of those she loved, the faces of her lost parents, the loyalty of Morrow, and the guiding light of Ellis. With a cry that echoed through the dreamscape and the waking world, she poured her will into the flower. The petals exploded outward in a radiant burst of light and color, a vortex of sound and sensation that swept away the tyrant's shadow. His form wavered, then shattered into a cascade of glowing seeds, each one a promise of renewal rather than ruin. Breathless, Alina collapsed to her knees as the garden round her softened into a gentle dawn. The ritual had succeeded not through destruction, but through transformation, yet the battle was far from over. Outside the dreamscape, Morrow's urgent voice cut through the quiet. "Alina, you must hurry. Doran and his forces are closing in." She rose, strength renewed but aware of the peril that still lurked. The flower's power was no longer a curse to fear, but a beacon of hope to protect. And Alina, once a cautious botanist, was now a guardian of memory and life, ready to face whatever storms the Empire would bring. Her journey was just beginning. The sun dipped low behind the tangled canopy as Alina and her companions prepared for the challenges ahead. The blooming of courage had marked a turning point, not an end, but a new beginning. With the flower's power transformed and her resolve hardened, Alina stepped forward into the uncertain future, her heart beating with the rhythms of the jungle and the echoes of a forgotten king. What new paths would unfold? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The petals of the past would no longer wither in silence, but bloom in the light of hope. Beneath the towering canopy, where ancient trees stretched their gnarled limbs toward the stars, a small clearing held the fragile heart of resistance. Alina Tar stood among the shadows, her dark braided hair catching the faint glow of lantern light as she exchanged hurried words with Morrow and Ellis. The air was thick with humidity, heavy with the scent of damp earth and crushed leaves, but beneath it lay the sharper tang of anticipation and unspoken fear. "They're coming," Morrow murmured, his eyes flicking toward the jungle's edge where the faintest sounds of movement stirred. His stocky frame was tense, fingers clutching the carved wooden talisman that had accompanied him through countless trials. Doran and his people won't wait long. They want that flower, and they won't stop for anything. Ellis, her pale face illuminated by the lantern's flicker, nodded slowly. Her silver-vined hair shimmered like moonlight caught in petals. And the dreamscape stirs. King Velen senses the tide turning. His advisors whisper like shadows, gathering strength. Alina drew a steadying breath, her green eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The mystical flower rested carefully in a vessel beside her, its petals faintly glowing with an ethereal light, as if breathing with a life of its own. The weight she carried was immense, not just the physical burden of the flower, but the legacy entwined within its delicate form. The soul of a forgotten tyrant king, a presence both cruel and visionary, pulsed within its core. "We have to be ready," Alina said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts raging within. "This isn't just about possession. If Velen's spirit breaks free, the Empire could unravel." Morrow's jaw clenched. "Then we hold the line, whatever it takes." As the night deepened, the trio made final preparations. Ellis wove strands of ancient floral magic around the clearing, petals blooming in spectral light, forming protective wards that shimmered like a veil. Morrow coordinated with trusted allies in the surrounding villages, setting traps and watch points. Alina, meanwhile, tended to the flower, whispering softly as if coaxing the tyrant's soul to calm. But even as they worked, the dreamscaper realm, where memory and reality intertwined, trembled with unrest. Far from the physical world, a tempest of swirling shadows and vibrant petals churned violently. King Velen's spectral advisors, ghostly figures woven of light and darkness, gathered in ominous council. Their voices rose in a haunting chorus, urging their master's spirit toward resurgence and dominion. Within that shifting landscape, Velen himself took form, a regal figure draped in petals and shadows, eyes blazing with fierce ambition and ancient pain. The forgotten tyrant's will surged, aching to reclaim the empire that had cast him into oblivion. Yet the dreamscape was no longer his alone. Alina's presence, her growing mastery of floral mysticism and memory lore, challenged his grip. Back in the waking world, dawn broke over the jungle, casting golden light across the verdant canopy and awakening a restless market below. The memory market, the vibrant heart of the Empire's economy, transformed into a battlefield as factions converged. Traders and agents moved swiftly, their faces masks of determination and greed, voices raised in urgent negotiation and threat. Doran, the ruthless memory trader, prowled among the stalls, dark eyes scanning for the flower's hidden location. His ambition was a blade honed sharp, his intentions clear: seize the flower and leverage its power to dominate the memory trade and, by extension, the empire itself. Alina, Morrow, and Ellis moved through the chaos with purpose, weaving through crowds thick with the scent of crushed flowers, smoke, and sweat. Every step was a gamble. Every glance could hide a threat. The fragile piece of the market cracked under pressure as rival factions clashed, shouts echoing against the vibrant tapestry of memory vials and botanical wonders. At the market's edge, Alina paused, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep within her chest. Above, the jungle canopy stirred with the songs of awakening birds. Yet beneath that natural symphony lay the discord of human ambition and ancient spirits. Her hand brushed the petals of the flower concealed beneath her cloak, a reminder of the delicate balance she must maintain. The storm was gathering, both in the physical realm and in the dreamscape's shifting mists. Alina's thoughts raced, grappling with the enormity of what was to come. Could she hold the disparate forces at bay? Could she protect the flower's power from those who would wield it for destruction? And, most daunting of all, could she resist the tyrant's soul seeking to consume her very being? Her gaze lifted to the horizon, where the first light painted the sky in hues of pink and gold. The jungle empire stretched endlessly, a living mosaic of secrets and histories, waiting to be remembered or forgotten. Alina's heart steeled with determination, her voice barely a whisper to the waking world. This ends now. The gathering storm was no longer a distant threat, it was here, and its fury would shape the fate of all. As the sun rose higher, the intertwined destinies of Alina, Velen, and the Empire's myriad factions hurtled toward their inevitable collision. The fragile threads of memory and power taut and trembling, and in that charged silence before the tempest, the question remained: who would emerge from the storm as guardian, and who would be lost to the shadows forever? Alina Tar stood at the heart of a clearing, the rare flower cradled carefully in her hands, petals trembling as if echoing the tumult within her own mind. Around her, shadows shifted, some natural, others spectral, whispering the weight of history and the peril of what was to come. From the depths of the flower's core, a presence stirred, coalescing into a form both beautiful and terrifying. King Velen, the forgotten tyrant, manifested before her not as the flesh and blood ruler of ancient times, but as a regal silhouette woven from petals and shadow, eyes blazing with the cold fire of ambition. His voice, a rustling of leaves and a chill wind, echoed inside Alina's head. You cannot resist what is bound to you, Alina. Your mind is but a garden where I will root and bloom anew. Alina's breath caught, the tendrils of his will pressing against the fragile walls of her consciousness. Yet, Within her surged a wellspring of defiance. She clutched the flower tighter, feeling the pulse of life woven through its petals, a complex symphony of memory, pain, and power. Drawing on every lesson learned, every secret whispered by the jungle's flora, she began to chant softly, weaving words of ancient botanical magic taught by Ellis. Vines of silver light spiraled from her fingertips, encircling the tyrant's shadow like chains of living growth. "You do not own me," Alina declared, voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. The petals around her shimmered, and the dreamscape bent and twisted, the boundary between reality and memory dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and scents. She envisioned the jungle's roots, deep and resilient, anchoring her spirit firmly to the earth, resisting the invasive darkness. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed from the clearing's edge. Morrow appeared, his sun-kissed skin gleaming under the moonlight, clutching a carved wooden talisman that glowed faintly with protective magic. "Alina, remember who you are," he urged, his voice carrying the weight of years of friendship and trust. His presence was a tether to the tangible world, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. Ellis emerged beside her, pale and ethereal, weaving intricate sigils in the air with hands that moved like silver vines. "Harness the flower's song," she whispered, her voice a soothing balm amid the chaos. "Transform the pain into strength, the past into a promise." Together they formed a triad of resistance against the tyrant's creeping influence. Alina's chants grew louder, her magic blooming outward in a cascade of glowing petals that danced like fireflies caught in a gentle breeze. The tyrant's form writhed, petals unraveling and reforming as he struggled to maintain his hold. Visions flooded Alina's mind, the brutal unification of jungle tribes, the echoes of fear and suffering, but also moments of fragile beauty flowers blooming defiantly in the ruins of old battles, a child's laughter carried on the wind. She clung to these memories, weaving them into her spell, transforming the tyrant's power from domination into reconciliation. The battle reached a crescendo as the first light of dawn pierced the canopy, casting golden fingers across the clearing. With a final surge, Alina released a burst of floral magic that shattered the tyrant's shadow into a cascade of glowing petals. They drifted down, settling gently on the jungle floor like snow, dissolving into the soil where new life would grow. Breathless, Alina collapsed to her knees, the flower resting quietly in her palms, no longer a vessel of tyranny but a symbol of hope. Morrow stepped forward, his eyes filled with relief and admiration. "You did it," he said simply. Ellis smiled softly, the silver vines in her hair catching the dawn's light. "The night has passed. Now comes the dawn of memory and healing." But even as peace settled over the clearing, a question lingered in Alina's heart. How to wield this fragile power wisely, so the cycle of pain would not repeat but instead give rise to a future where past and present coexisted in harmony. The jungle stirred with new life, petals shimmering in the morning light, and Alina knew her journey was far from over. Yet, in that moment, surrounded by friends and the whispering leaves, she dared to hope. The night had fallen, but petals against the darkness had bloomed with them, the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The battle had drained Alina beyond exhaustion, yet her mind remained sharp, alive with the resonance of the flowers, magic, and the echoes of the tyrant's fading presence. As the sun climbed higher, painting the jungle with warm hues, she rose, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders anew. Morrow and Ellis flanked her, their solidarity a quiet strength, but Alina's thoughts turned inward. The tyrant's memories still lingered faintly in her mind, fragments of fear, visions of power, and moments of vulnerability. She realized the true challenge lay ahead, not just resisting possession, but transforming the legacy of pain into something meaningful. "We must be vigilant," Ellis said, her voice calm yet firm. "The flower's power is immense, and others will seek to claim it." She gestured toward the dense jungle, where distant sounds hinted at the gathering of factions still hungry for control. "Then we prepare," Alina replied, determination stealing her voice. "Not to wield power for dominion, but to protect and to heal." Morrow nodded. "Together, we'll face whatever comes. The Empire's future depends on it." As they moved forward, the petals of the flower shimmered softly, a living testament to the struggle just endured and the hope yet to be realized. Alina knew the path would be fraught with peril, but for the first time, she felt ready to walk it not as a victim of memory, but as its guardian. And so, beneath the watchful eyes of the jungle's ancient trees, the battle for the soul of the Empire continued, carried on the petals against the night. The once tarnished grounds had begun to pulse with a quiet, radiant life, petals of every hue unfurling under the soft caress of twilight. Each flower seemed to hum with memory, a living mosaic of the Empire's past sorrows and future promises. The mystical flower at the heart of the garden glowed faintly, its petals no longer a prison but a beacon, a symbol of hope reclaimed from shadow. Alina knelt, her fingers brushing tenderly through the verdant leaves, feeling the pulse of life beneath the surface. The battle had left scars both visible and unseen, but the garden's slow revival mirrored the fragile healing of the Empire itself. The memories once wielded as weapons now wove together in a delicate tapestry of understanding and empathy. Here, in this sacred space, the past was neither erased nor exalted, but embraced. Morrow approached quietly, his heavy footsteps muted against the moss-covered stones. His sun-tanned face bore the lines of hardship, but his eyes held steady warmth and resolve. "It's hard to believe," he murmured, "that this place was once a battlefield." Alina smiled softly, the corners of her green eyes crinkling with quiet joy. The garden remembers Morrow, not just the pain, but the healing too. They stood side by side, the ruins of the memory market visible in the distant, silent witnesses to the Empire's tumultuous past. The air was thick with the scent of crushed petals and earth, remnants of conflict giving way to renewal. "People will be watching," Morrow said, his voice low but steady. "They'll want to see what this means." "We'll show them," Alina replied, her voice firm with newfound conviction. "Not just what it means, but what it can become." Nearby, Ellis moved gracefully among a small gathering of villagers and former memory traders. Her silver-vined hair caught the last light of day as she led them in a ritual of healing, her hands weaving floral magic that intertwined with the shared memories of those present. The circle pulsed with energy, a collective breath of renewal that bridged the spiritual and the tangible. Alina watched the scene unfold, feeling the weight of her new role settle upon her shoulders, not as a conqueror or a keeper of secrets, but as a guardian of memory and life. The Empire was fragile, its history stained yet rich, and it was her charge to ensure that memory would no longer be a weapon but a gift. Her thoughts were interrupted by a shadowy figure approaching from the edge of the garden. Doran, the relentless memory trader, stopped a respectful distance away. His sharp eyes, so often filled with greed and cunning, now reflected a reluctant contemplation. "You've changed things," he said quietly, his voice edged with something close to admiration. "I underestimated you, Alina." She met his gaze steadily, the tension between them softened by the tangible peace growing around them. "The Empire needs healing, not more division." Doran nodded slowly, then turned toward the jungle's edge where the dense foliage swallowed the setting sun. "Perhaps there's hope yet," he muttered before disappearing into the shadows. As night deepened, the garden thrummed with life and possibility. Alina lingered a moment longer, breathing in the mingled scents of earth and blossom, memory and renewal. The journey ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. But for the first time in many moons, she felt the fragile certainty of dawn. The garden had been reclaimed, and with it, the heart of the empire. But even as peace settled over the land, Alina knew the delicate balance she had forged would be tested anew. The past, after all, was never truly gone. It lived on in every petal, every whispered memory, waiting for the day it might bloom again. She rose, determination blazing quietly in her green eyes. "We begin anew," she whispered to the night, "and this time we remember." Alina stood at the heart of the gathering, her fingers gently cradling the flower, a slender vine of delicate petals that shimmered faintly with an inner luminescence. Around her, villagers of all ages had assembled, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and cautious anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, mingling with the low hum of whispered conversations. "Today," Alina began, her voice steady though tinged with the tremor of reverence, "we begin to see not only with our eyes, but with our hearts. This flower, once a vessel of a tyrant's soul, now holds the memories of our past not as chains, but as seeds for renewal." She raised the flower slowly, and the petals began to unfurl, each one glowing softly. Within their translucent depths, flickering images appeared, scenes from the Empire's history, moments both beautiful and brutal. A child's laughter echoed faintly, followed by the clash of distant war drums. A lush jungle blossomed and withered in moments. Faces, long forgotten, emerged and faded like mist. The crowd fell silent, eyes wide, breaths held. Even the skeptical elders exchanged glances, their usual reserve softened by the undeniable power of the living history before them. Morrow stood close by, his rugged features softened by a rare, hopeful smile. He caught Alina's gaze and nodded, a silent affirmation of the path they had chosen. Around them, villagers tentatively stepped forward, reaching out to touch the glowing petals. As they did, faint whispers of memories brushed against their minds, fragments of stories once hidden beneath layers of fear and forgetting. "It feels like the jungle itself is telling us its secrets," murmured a young woman, her eyes misty with newfound understanding. Later, beneath the sheltering boughs of ancient trees, Ellis led a group of villagers through a shared dreamscape. Their bodies rested on woven mats, but their spirits soared amid swirling petals and shimmering colors. Here, the memories within the flower bloomed into living visions, villagers rising and falling, laughter and sorrow intertwined like vines, the past and present entwined in a dance of light and shadow. "Remember," Ellis whispered, her silver hair drifting like mist, "only by facing the past can we heal the wounds it left." Back in the village, Sori sat beside Alina, her lined face illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern. "Our people have long buried their memories in silence," she said, voice steady despite the weight of centuries. "But the seeds of renewal lie in the soil of remembrance. If we nurture them, we may grow a future worthy of our ancestors' dreams." Alina absorbed Sari's words, feeling the fragile hope taking root within her. This was more than science, more than magic. It was a calling to mend the fractures in the Empire's soul. Yet, even as the flower's light spread, shadows lingered. Whispers of dissent stirred among those who feared change, who saw the flower's power as a threat to their dominion. Alina knew this was only the beginning of a longer struggle, delicate balance between illumination and darkness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the jungle sky in hues of rose and gold, Alina stood once more before the gathered crowd.